Serenbe is a place where people live, work, learn, and play in celebration of life's beauty. And we're here to share the stories that connect residents and guests to each other and to nature. This is Serenbe Stories. Today is a very special podcast episode as we're talking with a generational family here in Chattahoochee Hills called the Peeks. They've lived here for 6 or maybe 7 generations, and Chattahoochee Hills is the city that Serenbe sits within. Ned and Janice Peek, along with their son Rodney, joined us today, and they were the first people that Steve met when he moved to Chattahoochee Hills. When he needed help protecting their shared rural paradise, their table was the very first one that he sat down at to get them to work together to convince local government to change zoning in support of historic land conservation in our city. But first, Serenbe Stories is brought to you by the Inn at Serenbe. The Inn is nestled in the rolling countryside of bucolic Serenbe, where guests can walk on the 15 miles of trails through preserved forest land, the wildflower meadow, and the animal village. You can relax by the pool, hot tub, or in rocking chairs on the wraparound porch. Play on the croquet lawn, swings, and in-ground trampolines. Connect with nature and each other, all while staying in luxurious rooms on the inn grounds or within the community of Serenbe. Book your stay today at serenbeinn.com. Well, I want to welcome everybody back to Serenbe Stories today and want to say hello and good afternoon to everybody. We have a big crowd in the podcast studio today. We've got Steve Nygren as usual.
Hi, Monica.
And then we have the Peeks. We have Ned and Janice Peek and their son Rodney, who are, I want to say, 6+ generations of Chattahoochee Hills, even before it was Chattahoochee Hills. Mm-hmm. And we are thrilled to have you guys in the studio today.
Thank you.
It's really fun, and it's going to look fun to reminiscing because you're really the first people I met when we moved down here back in the old days. And of course, I want to talk about your kitchen table is the first place I came to talk about this whole crazy idea. So a lot of fun things to talk about and reminisce about today.
And one of the first questions I always ask everybody is, what was your first time that you met Steve or, because there was no Serenbe at that point, right? This would have been in the 90s. When did you first meet him as your new neighbor? And maybe what did you think of him?
I met Steve years ago in the early 90s when he first moved down because I would need his permission to go to the waterfalls. So I would take a tractor with a trailer full of children for picnics and run around and play in the creek. And that's when I first met Steve, and we kind of just, we were on the same wavelength, kind of just hit it off.
So this is the waterfall. This is in the southern part of the property, and it's a waterfall that most people who have grown up here knew about, even though it was on what was then the Barnes family, and then it became our land. And so Rodney was nice enough to always call and ask permission.
And on the way over today, we were just reminiscing. I asked my parents the first time they'd been back to the waterfall, their first memory of the waterfall. And my dad was telling me a story, and I never heard this before, that his dad was back there working the land. It was, even when I was a little boy, there were fields on either side of the creeks, and the tractor was broken down. And he remembers as a little boy going back to the waterfalls. And then all my life, we would walk back there together and, have picnics at the big waterfall. And back then, to a little boy, that was a huge journey. And I don't know, the first time that, Mom, you went.
I guess it's after we moved in the house, the first time we all walked back.
I remember one year, this has been years ago, and it was snowing really hard. We had a really deep snow for here, probably several inches. And our next door neighbor, Freddie and Sue, we called them and said, let's go for a walk out in the snow. And so we walked all the way back to the big waterfall, which is about a mile, and in the snow. And that was way before it was trees. It was pasture on each side. So it was quite different. But that was a great memory I have of going back to the waterfall.
You all bring up a great point that this was all farmland from the mid-1800s. And when you look at all the trees today, you can't imagine that. And Ned, I remember some pictures of you sitting on a big wagon with watermelons that you used to take to the city. And tell us about what it was like when you were a child in this whole area, and it was mostly farm areas.
It was all farming, and most of it was with mules, which we had a tractor to plow land up with to get it ready to plant. but then you worked it with mules. And we raised 20 or 25 acres of watermelons every year, and we'd take them to West End to the farmers market by the truckload.
Now, how did your family first come to this area?
I really don't know, but they've been here. See, on all four of my great-grandparents has been here for over 100 years, 150
That's amazing.
years. And the house I grew up in, my great-granddaddy built that house in 1854. And my grandmother and her family grew up in that house. And then my family grew up in that house, 10 kids.
And those 10 kids all stayed pretty close to this area.
They sure did.
I remember when we first moved here, there was a peak in every direction. You know.
They said we was like kudzu, just come up everywhere.
In fact, Rodney, you have what? How many first cousins that live right here?
Oh my goodness. It's, I'm not sure the actual number, but it's probably in the 20s or 30s. Because there's so many, you don't get to know them all. They have your last name, and you share some common experiences with a lot, and you're close. And some that are so much older or younger, you know them. You just don't really know them. But some of my earliest memories were going to his dad's house, right down the dirt road off Rico Road. You know, the floors were crooked, and they would have the date the house was built was nailed in the door. So we'd always look at that and trace it with our fingers. And all of his brothers and sisters, except for one, the youngest, were all born in the house.
Wow. It's incredible.
And listening to the stories, I love it.
This area is a very different time. So you've seen from the time we went from the mules to the tractors, from the time of what, Model Ts, or that was, I guess, and what was the earliest cars in your day?
In my day?
Yeah.
Was the 40s up. See, I was 4 years old in 1940.
Yeah.
And I remember when there was no cars, no newer than a 41, because the war started and the public didn't get cars again till 46.
Oh, wow. That's incredible, right? Because they put it all towards building.
Cars, it was scarce. It was hard to find a good car back then.
That's so interesting.
And then is it after the war that this area started turning back into trees, that people did not return to agriculture as you'd known it before the war?
If you grow up on a farm, you've had enough. Yeah, it was all farmland between here and Palmetto. Everybody farmed. All this wooded places, well, real rough woods, you didn't have farmland, but everywhere it was smooth, it was cleared, and it was farmed.
And what type of things did they farm besides watermelon?
Most people planted cotton, raised cotton, but my family did not. We raised produce stuff, beans, butter beans, peas, watermelons, corn, and we'd take that to the market.
So fun.
And then how'd you bring Janice down here into the country?
She saw me and run after me for a long time, and when I stopped, she caught me. No, my sister went to school with her, and we got to know each other.
That's great. And now, and of course, you have the two children who are what now, sixth generation. Is that right, Rodney? You're sixth. Is that what you said?
I'm the sixth generation.
Sixth, and your kids are
the seventh. And the older I get, the more it is an honor to be their son. The older I get, the more I see the wisdom that they've tried to teach me. And they gave us this, me and my sister Donna, they gave us a special gift this summer. 60-year wedding anniversary. So they've been married 60 years. And that's such a gift. And the older I get, the more I appreciate that.
Yeah. Congratulations.
Thank you.
It's really exciting.
You don't look like that's possible. and now it's fun because Jill, who's your granddaughter, who would be the seventh generation, she ran Serenbe camp with Kara.
I remember.
And so for years, all through high school and college, Jill was here helping Kara run camp. And now she has the first of the next generation, which is the eighth generation. So we're sure we're going to get Jill and the family back here at some point,
3-year-old son. And she also went to medical school, so now she's a doctor. She's loving every minute of it.
That's great.
So impressive. So let's get back to that kitchen table. So once Steve moved in, he was just your neighbor, right? You said
right.
Pretty quickly he went from city to country?
Mm-hmm. He did. He was a country boy. We'd see him out there working and had a tractor. And once you have a tractor out here, you're part of the group.
Okay. That's good.
And my tractor was always getting broke down because I would run into things. I was trying to use it as a lawnmower to take down these big trees and cut paths.
And so after all that time and you realized you were going to do something with the land, or these are the first folks you came and talked to?
Well, I've talked before about the fact that we left the city because we thought it was a great place to raise the children, and had really stepped away from the city. And then we had several things happen that we were afraid development was coming this way. And so my first visit was to the Peek kitchen table. And we sat there around your table and talked about what could happen. What if we could bring everybody together and do something different? And it was just sort of some broad concepts, because I'd already called some preservation groups, and there was no preservation money to buy land at this scale, especially they weren't thinking about this as being threatened land, although we could see it coming in the future.
And so what do you guys remember of that time?
This was the first time I really got to talk to Steve and really get to know him on a one-to-one basis. We'd met before, but when he came and sat down with us, and we felt really honored that he chose us to come and talk to us, and we felt like that that was, really special of him to do that, because he could have done it without even talking to us, but he wanted to know how we felt about it. And we loved the country, and we loved where we were. We loved the ruralness. And so anything that could be done to protect that and keep it like it was, we were all for, because we had seen what had happened up the road too, and it was scary. And we didn't know how to do anything, but he had the vision of what to do, and that was exciting to us.
Yeah, I was so proud that he did come and show it to us, which he was going to do it, but at least he let us know what he was going to do, and we really appreciated it. Mm-hmm. We sure did.
And then as we move forward with these ideas, and we got our grants to move a public process forward, we realized that we had to communicate and bring the entire community together. And so we had 7 groups that were called team leaders. And the Peek family was one of those team leaders that helped bring these concepts and had this discussion in neighborhood coffees before we went to a full public meeting. Mm-hmm.
Some of my early memories were Dad and myself and Steve and Garney, and we may be in Cedar Grove, some different churches around, and we would really, the community, we would ask for their input. Like, what is your plan? What are your plans with the land? Do you want to pass it to your generations, or it's the highest bidder? And we would kind of just listen. And I remember my dad, he doesn't really say much at those public meetings, but when he does, it just makes so much sense. And this lady was complaining about the change coming, and, she really didn't grasp it. And my dad just stood up, he goes, look, things are going to change. I wish I was 21 again, but things change. It's going to happen. You can have a voice at the table, or you cannot. And I just remember us going to several of those meetings and all the hard work and setting up the chairs, and it meant a lot, and the vision, Steve did have the vision, and it took kind of just educating people. You hear their concerns, you kind of make it organized and make sense, and this is the vision. We were all really wanted the same thing, and we came together.
And after all those neighborhood coffees, then we were ready for our first public meeting. Remember that? And we did the postcard, and it showed a pasture with cattle grazing, and then a picture of this scraped area by Palmetto that they were just starting to put stack houses. And we said, who do you want as your neighbor? And we sent that out. And remember the crowds? I mean, you could not fill the community room at the Rico Center. And it was, that was the beginning that we knew we had awakened a community.
Right.
And this area really was not thought of as even one area. It was individual sections, right? It was Rico and Goose and...
Right. Every little community had their own identity based on, back when he was young, you didn't travel far with a horse and a wagon. You usually stayed around the square mile where you grew up, and the Goods community, the Rico community over at Friendship and Cocker Mill, Rivertown Road area. Everyone had their own little identity and their own little group.
And we had all the rural churches, and everyone sort of gathered around the church, and that was sort of the community that you knew.
Right.
Yeah.
And this was when we were trying to become a city, right? So that was people. It was hard for them to understand that this was going to be a good thing when we became our own city.
So the timeline, this is that first visit to the Peeks kitchen table was in 2000. Mm-hmm. And then we organized the coffees in 2000, 2001, and the public meetings in 2002. And then we passed the revolutionary land use change. And I remember, I think we all drove down to Fulton County together that day. We
did.
We went down there with, lots of our Uncle Billy went, and me and Dad, and lots of the neighbors, and we all had on those matching shirts, and we sat together in that Fulton County commissions, and we were trying to get the zoning overlay passed.
That's right.
It was exciting. We took a picture of, remember the picture? We have a picture somewhere of the whole community in the Fulton County
That's
building.
right. I think we were on the steps of the Fulton County or out in their steps. So we had really brought an excitement. And we had so much support from the community, 80% of the landowners. We had really educated our county commissioners. And Steve Covert tells the story who was the planning director for Fulton County. And this was such a big thing leading up to this that everyone said, you have to be there, Steve, because this could be, who knows what questions you have to guide this through. So he left a meeting that he was up in Connecticut or some out of state, and he came back early. He says, I walked in, they introduced it. They said, is there any discussion? They said, no, passed. And he said, I was there for 5 minutes. I traveled all this way. He said, I've never seen anything pass so quickly. But that was because there was a community that had come together and had voiced a common voice or had expressed a common voice. And so, of course, our commissioners were going to follow what everyone. So that was exciting times. And then that was 2002. We broke ground on Serenbe in 2003. Mm-hmm. And then we had so inspired the community that there was an effort to become our own city. So I think, Janice, what you were referring to is that whole effort then that built up to be a city, and might want to share some of that. And Rodney was very involved and became one of our first council members.
Right. And, we have a special community and a special city. Our landowners self-tax themselves at $2 an acre to fund some of our zoning overlays and petitioning for the city. And then I remember and I was elected a city councilman. So for the first time in my life, really growing up, you never saw political signs because it really didn't matter. You had no economic power or political block. But when we became a city, a lot of the people that lived here, they would have a sign from each candidate because they knew everyone and they didn't want to hurt anyone's feelings. So there might be 4 people competing for the same office. They all have a sign in the same family's yard. And every vote counted. And soon after, I just distinctly remember from being a city councilman, there was a downturn in the economy. Things were not looking well for several different factors. So we had public meeting, here are the options. We could allow a strip mall on the Parkway or some development that's really not fit. We could, maybe merge with another city, or we can increase our tax rate, maybe double our tax rate. And of all the public hearings, it was overwhelming. We passed a 98% tax increase to applause.
Wow.
People wanted that. And then within a month, another community group collected enough money to buy the parks in Fulton County. It was just, what a special community that was. But becoming a city, you would ask someone, what do you think about us becoming a city? Well, in their mind, their city is, the main street. Growing up here, your main street was always Palmetto. The pharmacy was there. The post office was there. And people thought, a city in their mind, we're going to make this like Palmetto or a Fairburn or a Noonan. I don't want that. So this is what we mean. We're in control of our own destiny here. It's not a city. You're not just going to have this magical investment of a main street. We don't really want that. We're trying to preserve this. So you get back to the roots, what everyone has in common. They want to make this special. It's preserved. It's mostly green space, and less how do we make that fit and work? So that's what becoming a city became, an education process, and people saw it. And I think my parents' big play in this, they had so much credibility and so much recognition. And well, if Ned's one of a few words, if he understands it and he gets it, there's something to this. So let's listen to what's going on.
The Peek family has been an anchor in this community for several decades. In fact, when the Greystone was formed, which is your rural electric system, wasn't your dad the first director representing this area?
He wasn't at first, but he went there in about 1950 and stayed for 30 years. And then my brother went and stayed about 25 years before he died.
All representing this area.
Yeah.
So the Peek name has always meant a lot in this area.
Well, there's so many of us.
And Steve, don't underestimate, we were just talking, and so what do you think about Steve, Dad?
Well, he's my kind of man because he's honest and he put things out beforehand and let us know what's going on. And that's his right. And what you do is your right. If I've heard a lot of people complain about what you did back here. I said, that land's been back there all my life, and it's been for sale some. You could have bought it if you don't like what's there.
And helping the community.
Well, I'll tell you one thing that happened that really got next to me. Rodney got a special need little girl, and they had a race for Riley every year at Georgia Baptist Children's Home, which is a children's home. And so they had to race there for several years, and all at once they told Rodney, said, we can't let you have it here anymore unless you split the money with us. And Rodney said, no, we're not going to do that. He said, and he come home and told us, he said, I think I'm going to ask Steve about having it back there. I said, that'll be good. He come ask Steve and told him the situation and said, could I have this back there? Steve said, yes, you can. What can we do to help you? And so that says a lot. It meant a lot to me.
And that says a lot about the community support. And people often say, what's it like having neighbors, people that aren't really informed about what Serenbe is. And to me, you grow up somewhere. All of my neighbors up until 2019 have been there all of my life. They've known me all of my life. And, when you're sick, they bring you dinners. And Serenbe neighbors do the same thing. I remember when Mom was sick and when I've been not well, your neighbors, it's cohesive. There's some unity there, and they're great neighbors that come over and you do things for one another. And when Steve, that's supporting the community, that's supporting us, that meant so much to all of us.
And so now here we are. I know it's been amazing that you can walk through the woods. Literally, you're right next to it. You never have to cross the street, and you come to the Blue-Eyed Daisy or theater, and you're great supporters. And you've often talked how you never imagined this could happen. In fact, I remember when really we were talking more about what could happen, and I think I was talking with Janice and Ned, and you tell the story about how you and your sister thought that they were kind of getting...
Oh, my goodness. There's so much to share on that end. But my sister was like, Rodney, I think Mom and Dad are losing it. They think there's going to be restaurants and stores behind their house. Because, look, we live in the woods, right? We know it. There's been nothing. Any development would take place closer to the interstate or closer to Atlanta. And we used to have a little get together at my house every fall, and I would have the tractor and have a hayride. And there's a little waterfall behind my parents' house, and there's the waterfall back in the field, and we would go there. Well, this was in the early 2000s, and there was a big plywood sign. The trails that used to be the hunting trails were now kind of cleared because they were going to put the blue-eyed daisy in. And I told the adults on the hayride, there's going to be a little community back here. And I remember getting looks like, what is Rodney talking about? And because they just could not grasp that. And then like the next year where they started the townhomes, there's a 3-story structures. You could just see their eyes like, oh my gosh, what he said is really happening. What's going on here? It was very interesting. That was so exciting. And the Blue-Eyed Daisy, one of their first events was an event for Race for Riley supporting the Joseph Sam School back in 2005. It was just packed out. It was some of those memories, and also going back to when we first met. So my neighbor, Charlie Kordowski, had 2 daughters. They've been there all of my life, and he had a little airstrip. We would go on airplane rides. This was before Google Earth, so that was a real treat to get up there with a camera and take a picture of your house, and so exciting. Well, as he was nearing retirement, he wanted to be able to fly to a lake in Alabama with a different airplane and land on the water, so he cleared the land for a different airstrip. The first airstrip was 1,100 feet. This one was going to be about 2,500 feet, and that's what alarmed Steve. I remember talking to him, what is going on over there, Rodney? What is going on? So that was kind of like the trigger.
That's what we call the bulldozer moment. The morning that I found the bulldozer clearing those trees, I didn't know what it was.
Yes. And I work air traffic control. So it's in the city. There's a lot of people that have, are transient that moved in. And so we'll talk about coming down to my house to do something fun. And they all know I live in the country because a lot of times we go into town. Well, y'all come to my house. We'll go to a play and grab a bite to eat. And you can just see they look at me. Wait a minute. What do you mean? You live out in the country? Are we going to Peachtree City or Noonan or what? I'm like, it's really hard to describe to someone that has not been here, but it's so fun. They'll pull up to my house. We'll walk through the woods, literally just a few steps, and you're at the Blue-Eyed Daisy. You're at the main street, or you go to the stage, and there's the plays right there in the field. I love doing that. It is so fun.
Well, one of the greatest rewards is when I see all the families that still remain on this land. Because if you look at all the other areas, Cobb, Alpharetta, all the counties that are now part of Metro Atlanta, families such as yours have been pushed off the land in one way or another. Where I grew up in Colorado as the 5th generation, the fields that I played on are no longer there because of that development pressure. And so that's one of the great things. Our country roads still look country roads. And hopefully with the land use plan, you'll still look country roads 50 years from now where we have these little villages.
That's one of the best parts, is knowing that it's going to stay like that, because it is so beautiful out here. I love riding around on these little back roads and seeing all the cows and the pastures and everything. It's just beautiful, and it's so wonderful to know that it'll be that way for my future, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and on down the road.
And although we're saving 70% of the land and the trees, every tree that comes down hurts Janice's heart.
That's so true.
Janice...
She talks about you for cutting trees.
Oh, I know it. That's the only way I have my black...
It's a wonder you're not her enemy.
No, I do love trees, and I do. It hurts me when I see a big, beautiful tree like a big, beautiful white oak or red oak get cut down. I have to admit it. It does. It hurts me. But I do know that Steve has a vision. He has a plan. And even though some do get cut down, there's a lot that's going to be left. And that's what helps me to get through it.
Janice, tell us about how you learned so much about trees and your love affair with trees.
I got my love affair of trees from my daddy. My daddy had a great love of the woods and the country and farm and everything. He was raised that way. His granddaddy, my daddy's granddaddy, gave him that love. He was like a Daniel Boone. He could go out in the woods and find all the herbs and plants that helped you, back then they had to use that for medicine. And so he knew a lot about all of that, and he taught it to my daddy. And then my daddy passed it on to me, and that's where I get it. And I do love it. I do love beautiful, the nature and streams and the trees and flowers and everything out in nature. I love it.
And Janice is the one who taught me so much about the trees and to love the white oaks. And so you'll notice on our main street, it's all white oaks that are there. And that's because of
they're the best.
Janice Peek. That's right.
And right through the trees to the window here, is an old white oak tree that my dad said he remembers going by when he was young. And it's probably, how old do you think that tree?
I'd say at least 150 years old.
A beautiful white oak tree right by the little waterfall behind their house. So that's beautiful.
Great. But now there are quite a few families that's been in this area in Chattahoochee Hills, like our family has been.
Yeah, tell us more.
Older families that's been here forever.
Mm-hmm. Who are some of them?
There's some like Rick Cody Robertsons, and Robertsons is some, and Maliers. And
how about the Hearns?
Yeah, Hearn's been here.
Thompsons.
Hataways.
Yeah. Thompsons. Itsons. Well, some of them are not still around, but they was here.
And the fabulous thing is you can call those names and they're still here. And now some of the younger generations, younger than Rodney, are coming back to raise their kids in the area, which is really exciting.
It is very exciting. And as I talk to people that move back or that move here, they're coming here for a lot of reasons that I took for granted, and there's a new appreciation. Looking back at growing up in the country here, and your neighbors, and you feel comfortable just walking into their house really at any time. And some of my neighbors is still a no-knock policy. Anytime, this is Rodney, he's coming in to visit us. I love that. The no traffic, the scenic overlooks, the scenic vistas on the roads around here. Just this past summer, one of the stars from one of the plays, Marcus Smith, I believe, from LA, wanted a tour. So we loaded up in the Jeep and went for a 3-hour tour, and he kept commenting how pretty it is. There's no traffic. We stopped dead still in the middle of the road just to look at the cows. He's like, where I live, you just can't stop in the road. And things like that I've taken for granted. And I love it. I love it. I want, if my children choose to live here, I hope it's a great place so they can raise their family, so you can continue.
And the amazing thing is this is all within metropolitan Atlanta, that we have this incredible space that's right in an urban center, but it's very country.
So
25 minutes from the airport.
Always.
Right. That's right.
But now we walk back in these woods back before anything was here, because we've been in our house 52 years where we live. And when the kids were just small, we'd all four of us walk back right through here where this is.
And did you know the previous owners of the house?
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about who lived there before.
Shell family.
Oh, for Shell Road?
Yep.
So
they had 21 kids.
21 children? One family?
And that's where the main entrance to Serenbe is, off of Atlanta Noonan Road, and you can still see the chimney to the old house.
The house has not been torn down many years.
That's right.
Very few, but there was 22 kids. Some of the grandkids is still around from that family that lives around.
Tell the story. That is a great story of that family, of how the kids and the wife.
What do you mean?
The story of the Shell place, right?
Oh, I don't know if that story is true or not, but I've heard it.
I want to hear it now. It doesn't matter if it's true.
You keep saying it enough, it becomes a history.
Right.
This is family? Or?
We have it on tape from someone else.
It was our great-grandfather that built the house that we live in, that we grew up in. And he was married and had 12 kids, and his wife died. And so he needed a new wife, and there was a family that lived back over behind New Hope Church. The man had 3 daughters. they said he went over there and talked to the man and said, I need a wife. Would it be all right for me to marry one of your daughters? And he asked him which one, and he told him. He called his daughter out, said, come out, said, Mr. Phillips wants to marry you. And they did get married and had 3 more kids, and one of them was my grandmother.
Wow.
They say that's true. I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised back then because so many people in the community married each. Because you didn't ever get far from home.
No. And did anybody know or hear stories about the ruins that are here on the Serenbe property of the family? Was that a dairy?
They're talking about the ruins and the old stone house, the condor. Yeah.
I remember when the house was there, but it was an old house then, and they say they burned it down on account of taxes, so they wouldn't have to pay tax on it.
That's right. And you can still see, if you really know where to look, you can see the threshold and where the stone for the fireplace fell. But if you walk in the spring, you see all the daffodils from the yard, and you can really sort of squint your eyes and imagine all the buildings there around the house. The daffodils have survived through the years. Yeah, that house was, I believe, from the early 1800s, 1830, they said. So. And then in 1930, when Coweta issued a tax on any building with glazed windows, and your tax was based on the size of your window. And of course, at this point, that house was 100 years old, and I'm not sure how they were using it. And the landowner at the time said, it's not worth that. We'll just burn it down. And that's how we lost that house.
Wow. It's an incredible story.
Great stories. Mm-hmm. We at some point we're going to have a museum of the Chatt Hills area and the families, and I'm often intrigued because when we did the archaeological dig, they found the signs of all the Creek Indians down at the waterfall, and of course we know Mr. Robinson has that 2-page deed from when his granddad sold or bought the 600 acres here in 1860. And there was a note that they're Creek Indians, or they're Indians at the waterfall. We presume they were Creek because that's who was here. Right. And now the rock that we walked to, the big, we call it the Indian Rock. The University of Georgia said that comes from the Mississippian period of 1,500 years ago. But probably it could have predated that, because the mound that you see that's directly west of that was from the Mississippians, and they built that mound. And UGA is pretty sure that that's true, but we don't know how late. And then we had the one-piece carbon tested that was found in the archaeological dig, and that's 9,000 years old. It was probably an agrarian piece. So just imagine the agrarian history of this whole area. It would be fun to record it all.
It would.
And we would never know any of that if it wasn't for you, Steve.
Well, we love carrying, the land informs us, but also the people that were on the land. And that's why I hope we can record all this and have it so the generations from now will understand the generations that we can look back to, but what we're doing here today and the part you had in helping us bring an overlay and to stand up a city, because those things are easy to forget. And it'll be fun to have those records. And that's what this podcast is part about, is recording those stories. So we really appreciate y'all coming in today to chat about it.
Yeah. Great to have you all. Wonderful hearing the stories.
We enjoyed it.
Yeah. And hopefully we can do some more history recordings.
Yeah, thank you. It's fun to reminisce. And now it's going to be fun for all of us to look to the future, too. Thank y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to Serenbe Stories. New episodes are available on Mondays. Please rate and review the podcast, and make sure to email your questions for Steve Nygren to stories@serenbe.com. You may even get to hear them on the podcast. More details about episodes and guests are available on our website, serenbestories.com.